Have you ever wondered what the world was like before there were any people on it? Birds in the air or fishes in the sea? Journey back into time, back thousands of millions of years to when the Earth was young. And this is how it might have looked. For it was once without continents, oceans, or air, or living things of any kind. And from the interior, which has remained flaming hot even this day, hot steam and gases were squeezed out to form the Earth's primeval atmosphere. An atmosphere so thick, the sun's rays couldn't break through, and only lightning flashes pierced the darkness. The clouds were overladen with moisture, but if any rain fell, the crust would only boil it back again as steam. But at last, the crust cooled below the boiling point, and the rains began in earnest. How long it rained, no one knows, but it filled up all the vast hollows of the earth and formed its first seas. For a long time afterward, the crust continued to buckle and crack and grow thicker, while the gases trapped underneath forced their way out through volcanoes. And these gases, which were rich in chemicals of all kinds, emptied into the atmosphere and boiled up in the seas. There was as yet no living thing anywhere in the world. But the carbon compounds, which are the building blocks of life, were slowly linking up in the seas. And one day, scientists think it was over 2,000 million years ago, the first living things appeared. What they were like, no one really knows, for they left no trace behind. But they must have been far simpler and smaller than these microscopic organisms, which are believed to be their closest living relatives. Instead, we imagine them to have been mere particles of protoplasm, not yet organized into cells, but already able to grow and to move and to copy themselves, that is, to act alive. Nor do we know a great deal more about those which came after, for their soft, tiny bodies were buried in the mud and sand and crushed into rock, rocks that were later raised up by some action of the crust. All that we can be sure of is that as time went by, certain species grew larger and larger and more complex, and that at last, some animals appeared with bodies that were hard enough and large enough to leave their distinctive marks in the ancient mud. And it is through these remains or fossils that our history of life is traced, which takes us back over 500 million years to the dawn of the Paleozoic age, when everything that lived in the water. And the leading animals of the world were the trilobites and worms. The trilobites were actually very primitive arthropods, members of that large group of animals whose skeletons grow outside their bodies. But they were then the highest animals in the world. While the worms, who were soft-bodied, had already had a long line of development. Advancing another 150 million years, we find that in the shallow waters there are now great sea scorpions, ranging up to 9 feet in length, and also very simple fishes, with just a trace of a backbone. The oceans, meanwhile, were becoming crowded with shellfish, and on the sea floor grew flower-like crinoids and corals and sponges. And there were still many trilobites, but they were no match for these giant nautiloids, the 15-foot monsters who had now become the rulers of the deep. And again we move forward in time, only to find that life is still confined to the water, and that plants have not yet progressed beyond a primitive kind of fern. But the animal kingdom has taken another giant step forward by producing fishes with inner skeletons, the first true vertebrates. And here, in their tremendously bulky armor, are some of these early vertebrate fishes as they graze along the dark sea floor. And these are the scaly lobe-finned fishes who could breathe not only in water but out of it, and whose fins had sturdy bones in them. As we are about to see, this was to mark them for a most important role in the development of the higher animals. For in time, the shallow waters drained away, and in their wake, there arose forests of huge tree ferns, equisetums, and mosses. The plants had conquered the land, and were now producing the food and oxygen that land animals need to live. And the amphibians, the great-great-grandchildren of the lobe-finned fishes, had crept out after them. Having now grown lungs and the clumsiest of feet, they had become the first backboned animals to leave the sea. But they couldn't leave it altogether, for they still had to return to the water to lay their eggs and to be born in, as the fishes before them. Insects, too, appeared about this time, and some grew to be giants, like this 2.5-foot dragonfly preserved for us as a fossil. Ferns, equisetums, and mosses are still plentiful in the world today, but not the giants of the Paleozoic age. They toppled into the swamps, and with the ages turned into peat and coal, which are their remains. Same is true of the amphibians. The 10 and 15-foot monsters all died out, leaving behind only a few pygmy families, like the salamanders and frogs, and these strange and fish-like axolotls. But the amphibians had meanwhile given birth to a new kind of animal, the reptile. The world had grown colder and drier, for the land had again risen, and these thick-skinned reptiles, whose eggs could hatch on dry land, were branching out, producing clumsy, bow-legged varieties who lived off plants, and others who were savage and agile flesh-eaters. The lush forest had given way to smaller, tougher plants, and the reign of the amphibian was over. And now the curtain was rising on a new age of life, the Mesozoic, throughout whose entire span of 130 million years, the reptiles were to sweep the earth. Some grew into huge swamp lizards, like the dinosaur Diplodocus, who was the longest animal ever to walk the earth. Though for all his wonderful frame, he was almost brainless. Others sprouted featherless wings and took to the air. Such was the lizard Pteranodon, whose wingspread of 27 feet was the largest in history. Many of the reptiles returned to the sea, among them the lizard Mosasaur, who is believed to have been the most ferocious sea creature that ever lived. And as always, the waters teemed with shellfish. But it was the belemnites who were now the most numerous. And here we see them attacked by a large fish-like reptile called the ichthyosaur, who was himself the prey of the really enormous Pliosaurus. But chiefly, it was the age of the dinosaurs, of the great land lizards who specialized in armor, and those who depended on speed and ferocity. Their varieties seemed endless, and yet, when the land began once more to rise, ending the Mesozoic, the dinosaurs and nearly all the other large reptiles vanished from the earth, and no one quite knows why. It was almost as if the world was being cleared of the reptiles to make way for the warm-blooded birds and mammals, who were their descendants. Today, only a few orders of reptiles remain. The lizards, the snakes, the crocodiles, and the heavily armored turtles and tortoises. This is the fossil of an Archaeopteryx, the first known bird, though he still had the teeth of a reptile. Our own age, the Cenozoic, began about 70 million years ago. And by the time this herd of primitive mammals appeared, about the middle of the Cenozoic, the birds had conquered the air, and the mammals, with their improved brains and nervous systems, their warm, even body temperatures, and their better way of bringing up their young, had become the dominant animals of the world. The highest of the mammals is man, whose earliest traces we find at the beginning of the Ice Age, less than 1 million years ago, when the Earth had already put on its familiar appearance. We call this first known man Pithecanthropus, which means ape man. But already he was far more man than ape, for he knew how to use fire and to talk, and to make simple tools out of stone and bone. Long afterward, there arose the Neanderthal man, who was more intelligent and had a higher way of life. But a higher man still was developing, whom on account of his superior brain we call Homo sapiens, the knowing or wise man. And with his coming, all the earlier species of men disappeared. In this cave, we see a 40,000-year-old skeleton of a man whose body and brain were already similar to our own, together with his weapons of stone and flint. And these are his works of art, the animals he hunted and drew upon the walls of his caves. Some of these mammals, now vanished, may have been hunted down by man himself, or with his great gifts of cunning and his marvelously skillful hands, he soon became the most successful of hunters. But Homo sapiens did not remain forever in the shelter of his caves. As his knowledge and his skills increased, as he learned to read and to write, and to pass on his thoughts to others, he spread his rule over the entire face of the earth. And his power has been growing ever since, to build and to destroy. For man has found a new way to develop, and not by changing his body as other animals do, but by learning new things, and by inventing machines that do the changing for him. And so, without growing fins or wings, but only by the power of his mind, he has learned to outswim the fishes and outfly the birds. He has split the invisible atom and reached out to the distant stars. And all this is of man's million-year span, of life's 2,000 million years on the earth.
We are going to explore the surface of the moon. Our guide is Dr. C.H. Cleminshaw, director of Griffith Observatory. He has invited us to join him and his companion, Mr. Art Baker, on this adventure in science. By means of modern photography and high-powered telescopes, we can take what appears to be a real trip to the moon. So fasten your seatbelts, sit back and relax as Dr. Cleminshaw describes our trip.
Here on the instrument panel is a map of the moon and a guidance device that will chart our course over the surface when we arrive. Also, we'll be using this down viewer to see the terrain that passes beneath us. You will note that features of the map are recognizable with features on the real moon.
How clear it is.
Yes, Art, we are well beyond any trace of the Earth's atmosphere. The moon is only about 1/4 the size of the Earth and has no atmosphere, so there is nothing to obstruct our view.
Say, Doctor, you said that the moon was smaller than the Earth. Now, what has that to do with it having no atmosphere?
Its gravity is only about 1/6 as much as that of the Earth. You probably know that by the word atmosphere, we mean a layer of gases that surrounds our Earth or some other celestial body. These gases are made up of fast-moving molecules. The moon is too small to have enough gravity to hold on to them, so it has no atmosphere at all.
But without atmosphere, I imagine it'd be pretty uncomfortable on the surface.
Yes, the air on the Earth keeps out some of the sun's heat. But on the moon, without that protection, the temperature gets up to about 200 degrees. The air on the Earth at night is like a blanket holding the heat in. But on the moon at night, the temperature drops to 250 degrees below zero.
Now, let me get this straight, Doctor. Without protection of atmosphere, the moon gets to 200 degrees above zero in the day and 250 degrees below zero at night?
That's right. This eerie land we are approaching is a dead world without air, without water.
Well, speaking of water, Doctor, haven't I heard those dark areas spoken of as seas?
Yes, that's what early astronomers thought they were. They called them maria, the Latin word for seas, and they gave them names that we still use today. The one to the far right is called Mare Crisium, Sea of Crises. Immediately to its left is Mare Tranquillitatis. Above it is Mare Serenitatis, Sea of Serenity. This is the area in which man's first successful moon missile is reported to have landed. At the top of the moon is the North Pole. That perhaps is why the area directly below was called the Sea of Cold, or Mare Frigoris. Of course, these maria cannot be oceans, for there is no water. They are plains, probably similar to great lava beds we know on Earth. Filling the upper part of our windshield now is Mare Imbrium. Remember some of these names if you can. Mare Imbrium. It is often visible to the naked eye from the Earth. Our first excursion will be a flight around its shores. We're heading for the mighty crater Copernicus, which will serve as a reference point for our explorations. It is about 70 times as large as the enormous meteorite crater in Arizona. We're not sure what formed each of the craters of the moon, but Copernicus certainly gives the appearance of having been caused by an explosion and could well have been formed by the impact of a meteorite or even a small planet.
I wonder how big a dent we would make.
Well, perhaps we could make a good-sized crater at this speed. There we've leveled off and are traveling north across Mare Imbrium. You'll notice that our path is being charted on the map. We'll swing around Mare Imbrium and back to Copernicus. Straight north in front of us is the Bay of Rainbows.
It certainly doesn't look like any bay I've ever seen on Earth.
Well, it isn't. Its surface seems to be a flat lava bed, and there couldn't be any rainbows here, for there is no rain. Moving along the shoreline, we see what would appear to be offshore islands. Now we come to one of the most studied craters on the moon, Plato. Some astronomers believe that there is a fog visible at sunset and sunrise on the floor of Plato. It is mid-morning now, so we're unable to see it.
Now, how could a fog exist if there's no atmosphere?
Well, if it does exist, it is probably formed by gases escaping from old volcanoes. As you can see, the moon has mountain ranges, as we do on the Earth. There are the Alps. and the Caucasus.
Sounds like those names were borrowed from the Earth.
That's right. Here, we can turn on the down viewer now.
Doctor, are we still over Mare Imbrium?
Yes, we are.
It's difficult to think of this as an ocean with these big craters.
That's right, Art. A dark sea of rock and desolation. Well, we're now leaving the coastline and going over the Apennine mountain range. Some of these peaks reach an altitude of 20,000 feet, as high as any mountain on the North American continent. Now, if you will look far off to the right, you will see our reference point, Copernicus.
Doctor, I'll never forget it.
Well, it is a good one to remember and can be seen from back on Earth with nothing more than a pair of binoculars. We will follow the Apennines back to our old friend Copernicus, come to a complete stop, and hover directly over the crater. You have probably noticed how well the mountains and craters stand out when the sun is in such a position that they cast shadows. Such is the case with the crater Eratosthenes beneath us. But we're missing one of the moon's most brilliant displays when the sun is in this position. So as soon as we have stopped, I'm going to cause time to move forward and to bring the sun directly overhead. See how the shadows have faded as the sun moves overhead? The light areas are brightening to a glow. The whole scene has changed. Now we will move straight up to see the great blazing spread of these rays. When the sun is in this position, the lighter areas of the moon can best reflect light. This is particularly true of the ray systems of many of the explosion craters, such as Copernicus.
Well, that crater that we passed over a moment ago seems to have completely disappeared.
Eratosthenes. Yes, that's right.
Well, Doctor, what are these rays?
There are several theories on them. They could be dust and debris thrown out by an explosion, or they could be the result of cracks caused by the impact of meteorites. Gases could have seeped up from the cracks, condensed, and formed white powder on each side of the crack. But for a truly brilliant ray system, look to the far south at Tycho. Remember that name, Tycho. On Earth, it can be seen under good conditions at full moon with the naked eye. Its rays run for hundreds of miles. Imagine the explosion that must have formed it.
It almost gives the impression that an explosion is taking place right now. Could we get a closer look?
We will. To see it best, we should have the sun at an angle that shadows are cast. So we'll drop back quickly to our position over Copernicus. Move time forward, and we'll be off to the big crater country in the south. The rays are fading slowly, and the shadows reappear as the lunar day wears on. All right, off we go.
You've moved time forward pretty fast. What time is it now?
Well, where we are right now, it's late afternoon. On the moon, a day is about a month long. The sun rises and sets 2 weeks later, because the moon rotates on its axis only once a month. We are now passing over a fascinating old walled plain. This is Ptolemais. It's approximately 90 miles wide. The very smallest craters you can see on its floor are about the size of the meteorite crater in Arizona.
It appears to be hexagonal rather than round.
Yes, that's right. The moon is probably composed of the same basic material as the Earth, but without an atmosphere to cause wind and water erosion. Its surface has remained virtually unchanged for countless centuries. This is called the Straight Wall. Actually, it is not a wall, but a cliff, and it is a big one, 800 feet high and 80 miles long. There must have been a great sinking of the moon's surface here at one time to have created this long, sheer cliff. Well, now for that closer look at Tycho I promised you. We'll make a climbing turn and make a direct approach to it. There, it's centered before us. With the sun in this position, the rays are barely visible. Nearer the horizon is the enormous Clavius. Here is a good example of the varying ages of the moon's crater-like formations. The smaller ones inside and on Clavius' rim were obviously created after it was.
That's wild and desolate land. Surface travel will be difficult down there.
Would you like to go down and land?
Well, yeah. Okay.
We have flown away from the portion of the moon that is lighted by the sun. But we won't be landing in darkness. The Earth reflects sunlight, and this is much brighter on the moon than moonlight is on the Earth. If we could step outside there and get on a scale, we'd find our weight only about 1/6 of what it is on Earth because of the lower force of gravity of the moon. But I wouldn't recommend a trip to the moon as a way to lose weight. The sun is just below the horizon there. There you see a peak that the sun's rays are just touching. Well, Art, it's time to start back home. We have quite a trip ahead of us. The average distance between the moon and the Earth is about 240,000 miles.
Say, that's home, isn't it?
Yes, that's Mother Earth. From this distance, it looks like a large ball hanging in space. Actually, it is traveling at a speed of 66,600 miles an hour in its orbit around the sun.
Do you think there are other Earths as beautiful and abundant with life as ours?
It is certainly possible. We may never know the answer to that question, but it is well to consider our blessings, and at the same time give thought to our humble relationship to the vast realm of the universe. Such contemplation may make it easier for all of us to get along with our fellow passengers on this spaceship we call Earth.
star called the sun. Also, your home. How good a home it will prove to be and how well it will continue to serve you and your children depends upon you, and up to now, you haven't taken care of it. The time has come to take a very careful look at the fortune which you have inherited, because this legacy will not be given to you a second time, and you have been steadily whittling it away every single day of your life. Where did it come from? Once upon a time, there was no life upon the land. Only the raw materials of life. Water, air, sunlight, and rock. Over countless centuries and through many different agencies, the forces of nature broke up that rock. One process which clearly illustrates how this takes place is the grinding of the rock. Here we see the clear green ice of a glacier. With its enormous weight, the glacier acts like a giant file upon the mountain. Already we can see streaks on the ice of broken rock torn from the mountain's face. At the foot of the glacier, the ice is covered by a blanket of ground-up rock. As the ice melts, rock particles are released, as we see here. They are dropping into a glacial lake, later to be carried downstream and ground into ever finer and finer size by the action of the water. Here a glacial stream carries the ground-up rock into a clear brook, later to be deposited in beds of sand or silt. Tiny lichens gain a foothold even on the face of a barren rock. Acid from their roots dissolves the minerals from the rock. These lichens absorb moisture from the air. They grow, reproduce, and die. The organic matter of their remains mixes with the sand or silt to produce the first soil, a seed bed in which higher forms of plants can grow. These in turn die, contribute their substance to the seed bed until on a bare rocky ledge we find organic matter deep enough to support a small tree. These simple plants have enacted before our eyes a most astounding drama. They have taken dead inorganic rock and air into their own living bodies, and here is the miracle of life. The birth of a plant. As dynamic and as demanding as the human race itself, this sprouting bean turns greedily toward the sun for its nourishment. The green coloring matter in its leaves, known to us as chlorophyll, has the power to harness the sun's energy and to build it into life. As the leaves turn toward the east to catch the morning sun, so also they follow the sun until it sinks in the west. When this plant dies, or when an animal dies and decays, it contributes by its death new and vital combinations of elements to the soil. Insects, millions of them to the acre, break up the dead plant, mixing it into the soil. Molds and bacteria cause it to decay, thus enriching the soil through the miracle of death. Underground, the worms do their part by eating the rock particles, digesting them, and casting them upon the surface, replacing the minerals used up by the plants. Step by step, the character of the soil is changed. The dark topsoil has taken shape. Living topsoil, man's most precious possession. And this was only the beginning of your inheritance. Here is a water lily. It will become a forest. For through the ages, these lilies died and added their substance to the bottom, which rose until shallow water plants like the pickerel weed and the maiden cane grass came in to crowd them out and add to the mire in their turn. Cypress trees, too, grew in the now shallow water. They died, filling the lake bottom until it rose above the surface. And now, different trees, better adapted to this drought, came in to crowd out the cypress. Trees which later gave way to the so-called climax species of the permanent forest. From a water lily to a forest. Gradually, we see emerge a vast pattern or plan of nature, the dependence of the new life upon the death of the old. And this, too, was part of your inheritance. These are steelhead trout, driven by nature's urge to do battle with the river. They have come from the Pacific Ocean and are now fighting their way upstream to the quiet spawning grounds above. Fighting and failing and returning to the fight again and again. Nature's plan and operation in all its violence and beauty. The gallant battle of these fish is just as much a part of nature's balanced order as is the evolution of the lily to the forest. This, then, is your inheritance. First, the life-giving topsoil. Then came the plants, the basic source of food for all higher forms of living creatures. Then the forests, which protected the soil and helped to build it. And the clear, fresh waters, the arteries of life flowing out of the forests which stored it. And animal life, too, in all its infinite variety, each creature in its turn depending upon the topsoil and upon other animals for existence. And each form, however great or small, contributing by its life and by its death to the total but ever-shifting balance of nature. All this became your legacy. And now mankind began to make his perilous way on this new earth. He learned to make weapons, and he not only found food for himself, but he protected his offspring successfully against all enemies. And so his numbers grew. With a growing sense of beauty, he developed his first arts and skills. And the age of pottery came to China, and copper to Troy and Greece, and bronze to Sweden and France, and Central Europe knew the fabulous worth and power of iron. And now his progress began to accelerate out of all proportion to the progress of the past. For with the age of iron began the dawn of modern civilization. Spanning the continents and oceans, his numbers now multiplied over the face of the earth, for man had become the paragon of animals. He constructed tools that help him gain a living from the earth. Hoes, plows, rakes, harrows, harvesters, dredges, cranes, and monsters like this. But almost everything he did or invented or fought for began to injure the balance of nature, for man was blindly attacking the earth. Man cleared the forests from much of the land, and when the forest was exhausted, he moved on. In the early days, knowing no other way, he burned his clearings and moved on. He exhumed the mineral riches of the earth and moved on. He decimated wildlife and moved on to better hunting grounds, and always to new and unexploited land. And wherever he moved, whatever continent he visited, he rarely understood nature's patient and orderly system of conservation. He was too busy to notice, or too careless, or too ignorant, or too greedy. But the good earth he inherited could do only so much work and no more. But too often men cruelly overworked it, taking too much from it in too short a time, whether it was trees or crops or wild animal life, leaving it weakened, exposed, and vulnerable. But nature struck back in swift retaliation. And after man had moved on, the ruin was often made complete by the undeterred fury of the wind. And the land rose up into the air. The protecting forest is gone. The soil is torn from the watersheds. Floods roar down the valleys and over the once fertile fields. The water which promised life and abundance to the land below has now become a frightful instrument of destruction, drowning the land. Erosion, grim monument to man's misuse of the land, claims vast areas of the world's productive surface each year, each day, each minute. This was once a forest in China. This was a cotton field in Arabia. This was a farm in Tennessee. This was good grazing land in New Mexico. This is death, the final harvest of ignorance, of carelessness, and of greed. We do not know exactly how much of the productive land of the world man has destroyed. We do not know exactly to what an extent he has reduced the size of the earth's woodpile, nor exactly to what extent he has polluted the clear, fresh waters of the earth. But we do know this. Roughly 3/4 of the earth's surface is covered by water. The land area which is left is by no means all productive. Much of it is too hot or too dry. Another large section is nothing but polar wastelands. Much of what remains is of relatively poor quality. The really productive area is but a tiny fraction of the whole. Though not all of this land is under cultivation, and though science can and will increase its productivity, and may even force production from lands that are today barren and useless, the physical area of this small slice is fixed. It cannot be altered. That's all there is. There isn't any more. In 1630, the Earth's human population was about 400 million, with approximately 10 acres of potentially productive land for an individual. Today, there are 2,200,000,000 of us, with less than 2 acres of potentially productive land apiece. With this fearful human pressure against the land and its resources, we are fast approaching a crisis. For there are no new lands to the westward to be discovered and exploited. We have come at last to land's end. And where do we go from here? The answer depends upon you and upon your acceptance of the fact that a long-range, worldwide plan for conservation is necessary. What does conservation mean? It means literally the wise management of the life-supporting resources, the soils, the plant life, and the forests, the animal life, and the fresh water supplies. Wise management means working these resources only up to the point of their maximum sustained yield. Nor should we ever for one moment forget that these 4 great life-supporting resources are dependent one upon the other. For topsoil cannot produce crops without water. The earth cannot hold and store water without forests and grasslands. Animal life, too, is necessary to give the soil its productive power. All are part of a vast chain of life. And upon those links depends the existence of the entire living community. Today, the threat of hunger menaces 1/3 of the world's population. Yet each year in this country alone, we are losing the equivalent of nearly 500,000 acres of land which our rivers carry down to the sea. Each year our water tables are lower than the year before. Each year we are losing to axe and saw and to fire and pest 3 trees of saw timber size for every 2 that grow. It is time for every American citizen to find out and to understand what is happening to his land, to understand and accept the fact that man must live on the earth and live with it, to realize and act on the need for a system of orderly management. The problem can be met. The decision of want or plenty depends upon you, not upon your stars, not even upon your science, for science has not yet proved a substitute for the elemental workings of nature. Our transport may bring San Francisco and London as close as tomorrow's breakfast, but you can't get food from land like this. Our cities may have the tallest buildings of the world, but there are no vitamins in this kind of earth. Our army may have every available weapon for defense, but you can't grow beans from cracks in the soil. It's a fine morning and it's a good land, America, especially for children. America the beautiful, with amber waves of grain, with purple mountain majesty above the fruited plain. Yes, it's a good land, America. At least it was. It doesn't have to be like this, for today we have the technical skills, and these young people don't seem worried. They have faith and hope in America, just as they have in their parents. You are their parents, and you hold their future and their inheritance in your hands. Of motion, the flowing muscles. Consider then a relative. He's just as much a horse as the others, but what contrast! What makes horses resemble each other in some ways, yet differ so widely in others? What, for that matter, makes people so much alike, and yet so different from each other? What makes you what you are? Behind you, behind each of us, there are influences of 2 general sorts. From your parents and grandparents, and from all the rest of your ancestors, you receive certain influences. You are born with them. We call these influences your heredity. After your birth, the people around you exert influences on you. So does the society in which you live. So does the world of nature itself. We call these influences your environment. Together, heredity and environment make you the person you are.
Heredity and environment make Hank Johnson the person he is. The riding stable where he works part-time is part of his environment. So is the Johnson farm where Hank lives. Hank is proud of this herd of dairy cattle. And he has every right to be proud, for these are fine cattle. They produce rich milk in good quantity. Why is Bossy such a good milk producer? Well, first, because she has good heredity. She comes from a long line of good milk producers. Here are her sisters and cousins, her mother and grandmother. They too give plenty of good milk. Her father is this breeding bull the Johnsons keep. His heredity too is favorable for high milk production. But does heredity alone give Bossy all she needs to produce good milk in quantity? No, indeed. Environment must play its part. Bossy's environment includes this clean barn, free from the annoyance of flies. It includes good feed and gentle care, and regular feeding and milking habits. Bossy's environment, all the influences from the world around her, enables her to fulfill the high promise of her heredity. A fine animal, or person, is the result of good influences from both heredity and environment. Now, what are the principles by which heredity and environment function? Let's examine first the large principles of heredity. 1. Offspring tend to resemble their parents. This is true of dairy cattle, and of pigs, and of dogs, and of course of people. Offspring tend to resemble their parents. But there are exceptions. Although Hank grew up and works in the same environment as his father, still, Hank has fair hair and blue eyes. His father and his mother have darker coloring. In appearance, then, Hank does not resemble his parents, although people who know him say that in many ways Hank is like his father. So while it doesn't always hold true, one principle of heredity is that offspring tend to resemble their parents. Another is that offspring vary according to known patterns of variation. How many different possibilities there are in a litter of kittens. They vary from each other, though in many ways they all resemble their parents. How widely two brothers may differ from each other. Offspring vary in appearance and in temperament. Again, there are exceptions. Identical twins resemble each other far more than they do either parent. But even the exceptions follow certain patterns of variation. Finally, offspring tend toward the average. Year upon year of patient and careful breeding has given us many exotic varieties of pigeons. But let that controlled breeding stop. Let Pouter breed at will with Fantail or with Tumbler, and within a few generations, what have you? Just plain pigeons. Offspring tend toward the average. Often this happens with people, too. A tall man and his quite short wife may have a daughter of about average height. These, then, are the broader principles of heredity. Offspring tend to resemble their parents. Offspring vary from each other. Offspring tend toward the average. In long experiments, scientists have charted patterns of hereditary influences through many generations of animals and plants. Their findings make up the study of genetics, the study of how heredity works. But now, how does environment operate? This sickly corn grew from the very finest hybrid seed. It has very good heredity. But what an environment! Poor soil, choked with weeds. Not enough water. No treatment for disease. The result? Scraggly ears. Small yield. This corn was grown from the same seed, but with far better environment. Plenty of water and sun, rich soil, the right kinds of fertilizer. Plants and animals cannot control their environment. But as for people, well, people too are shaped by environment. But they can also influence their environment. Hank's environment has had much to do with shaping him. He's always lived on a farm. Think how different his life might have been if he'd been born in the city. Or grown up along the seacoast. What if Hank's mother had been a musician and taught him to play? Or even suppose Hank had been brought up on a different farm. Suppose his family had been less industrious. All sorts of things might have happened to Hank because of differences in his environment. With the very same heredity, a different environment would have made him quite a different person. But beyond this, Hank himself plays a part in shaping his environment, as do all of us. You change your environment every time you work to improve your surroundings. Every time you choose a new friend. Every time you make plans for the future and carry them out. Every time you study to learn more of the world about you. How well and how wisely you work to improve your environment determines how much you can improve yourself. Our heredity is determined. We cannot change it. But we can influence our environment. This is the great possibility which lies in all of us, to change our environment and make it as Hank and his family have done. To fulfill the best promise of our heredity, we must work constantly to improve our environment, and so live a happier, fuller life.
Ladies and gentlemen, step right up and see the great Conservo, the king of the magicians. He'll baffle you, he'll amaze you, he'll leave you speechless. All right now, step right up and get your tickets from a little blonde girl. It's at least 10 degrees cooler on the inside. Here is the greatest show that you're going to see today. Here's your chance to be amazed and baffled. You'll be left speechless by the great Conservo, king of the magicians. This is your chance to see the real thrill show here on the Midway. Here's something you won't want to miss before you go home. Yes, sir, friends, step into the tent. You'll enjoy yourself.
That's right, folks. Step right up and see the great Conservo work his magic. It's not the usual kind of magic act, believe me. I think you'll get a kick out of it.
Watch closely now. As you see, he can do all the usual magic stuff. This is the sort of trick I like best, pouring water on a tree to make it grow. When he does something like this, the magic of conservo becomes for me the magic of conservation. Now take this trick with corn. Wouldn't it be wonderful if all the foods we use could be produced so readily and rapidly? But of course, they can't. And yet, there's some magic involved. The magic of man working with nature, using just the right tricks of conservation to keep our land fertile and productive. Yes, it takes magic of a sort to transform land like this, worn out and eroded, into land like this, rich with new life, growing corn and other foods we need for our tables. The best trick, of course, is to handle our land properly in the first place. On our farmlands, this calls for good conservation practices. Plowing on the contours, not across them, helps the water to sink in and be used, not to run off and be wasted. It also helps to keep the precious soil in place to grow more crops and not wash away down the slopes into the streams. Where rainfall is heavy and the soil susceptible to erosion, building terraces protects valuable farmlands as well as steep mountain slopes. Since different food plants use water and the chemicals in the soil in varying amounts, the wise farmer rotates his crops. This gives the soil a chance to rebuild its fertility. By way of improvement, use of lime and fertilizers helps put into the soil these chemicals which are missing or have been used up. Usually, better production results. All this is the magic of soil conservation. Not quite so simple as pulling corn out of the air, but just as dramatic, I think, when we understand how our land, with proper care, produces the food we eat. This is our heritage, a heritage that must be protected and conserved. But now let's see if the great conservo can open another magical vista for us. He's back to his rabbit trick again. But wait, that's not a white show rabbit this time. Looks like a cottontail to me. Why, of course, this has to do with wildlife. We Americans love to hunt. We love to fish. Many of us prefer a camera to a gun. But whatever our outdoor sport, wildlife figures prominently in it. You're probably wondering how conservation fits into the picture. Well, if the wild animals are to exist at all, they need food and shelter. They need clean water. So back of our enjoyment and use of wildlife year after year is the work of the conservationist. His work benefits not only the wildlife, but all of us who love the outdoors. It's his job to maintain and improve the wildlife habitat. He plants additional food when it's needed. Sees to it that homes are left for our wildlife friends when timber is cut. He provides game laws to regulate hunting and fishing and proper bag limits so that the surplus game and fish may be harvested and enough food left for those that remain. That's a good trick when man works with nature to bring about stream pollution is an example of nature out of balance, resources abused. These are whooping cranes. Once abundant, they now number less than 50. The history of the whooping crane has been a long struggle with man for living space. Good habitat, where he can successfully rear his family, has given way to man's plow and industry. What little area is left for the whooping crane must be guarded and improved, or no magic of any kind will ever save this interesting bird in his natural environment. The great conservo will have that tree popping through the top of the tent if he isn't careful. What's he got up his sleeve now? Well, I'll be doggone. That's coal pouring out. Black diamonds. Coal is one of our important resources, and once used up, cannot be replaced. Another, its liquid cousin, is oil. Then there are the ores containing iron and other valuable minerals. These resources may one day be lost to us unless we use them properly. In the steel mills and iron foundries, the forges yield the material for ships and bridges, and bicycles too. We must take care of them, no matter how big or small. This is conservation, to use our resources wisely and waste not. It took nature thousands of years to make our oil and mineral resources, and no amount of magic will ever replace them once they are lost. Not even the great conservo's magic. The tree again. Now, why does he keep working on that tree? I've got it. After all, it was the trees and other plants centuries ago which fell to the earth and under tremendous pressure were converted into the coal deposits of today. Have you ever thought what our life would be like without trees? Nations that have destroyed and wasted their forest resources know what this means. Unproductive land, barren and ugly, pockmarked with gullies. Here the soil washes away under the force of every rainstorm, and we get floods. We must keep our forests growing and productive. We must protect them against wildfire. Through airplane spraying and every other means, we must protect them against damaging insects and disease. We must use good cutting practices, leaving at each harvest enough trees to grow for future crops. Good logging methods keep the small trees free from injury and prevent erosion. And where it is needed on lands best suited to forests, the planting of trees will put the land back to work. No one knows better than the great conservo that it takes water, clean water in steady supply, to make things grow. Well, don't tell me the great conservo has run out of water. No, through his magic, he can apparently call on a never-ending supply. You're probably thinking, "Aw, shucks, we can do the same thing without magic, simply by turning on a faucet." But there's more to it than that. We've got to look behind the faucet, back to the trees, shrubs, and grass. The streams, the pipes and conduits, the lakes and reservoirs, and the land itself. Water is the lifeblood of the land. It maintains all plants and all animals. Only through conservation in our forests and rangelands and on our farms and ranches can we help achieve water conservation. Here lies the promise of an adequate supply of usable water now and in the future. Well, here we go again. Wait a minute. Looks like the great conservo's magic has really run out this time. Yes, the show is just about over. You probably guessed it by now. The great conservo. He's a real good friend of mine. He loves the outdoors as much as I do. And now, we're off for a weekend of fishing.
Yes, we're heading out to where the greatest show of all is going on, where man and nature work together to improve and maintain our magic land through conservation.
Hi. I'm mighty glad to join you here at your 1959 roundup, even though it's by way of film. I know you're having a good time, and that's exactly the way it should be. The motion picture you have just seen, Our Magic Land, was specially designed to give young people like you a better and fuller understanding of just what conservation is and what it means to you and your country. I have had many wonderful reports of the fine work you Girl Scouts are doing in conservation. Your outdoor good turns rate very highly throughout the country as worthwhile conservation activities. Keep up the good work. Good luck to you, as you move on to new frontiers of interest and understanding, of friendship, and of living the Girl Scout Code.
It's early in the morning before this large supermarket opens for customers. I'm the manager of the supermarket. And this is my son, Johnny. This morning, I'm going to show Johnny what goes on behind the scenes here before the day's business can begin. A supermarket is like many little markets or departments, all brought together into one big building. Each department sells a different kind of food. One of my jobs, I tell Johnny, is to see that the market has plenty of food to sell. I must also see that all the people who work in the market know what to do, and that they do their jobs well. My first job in the morning is to open the door to the rear loading platform where deliveries to the market are made. Watch this truck backing in, Johnny. It's bringing some of the food the market will sell. Here's a man unloading vegetables and fruit from a vegetable or produce truck. The vegetables and fruit are taken to a storage room in the back of the market. Here they are cleaned. It takes a great deal of work to prepare the vegetables so they will be clean enough to sell to customers. From the inside of this truck, a roller track carries cartons of canned and paper goods into the market. A moving belt inside the building carries the cartons to a second-floor storage room. Here, they are taken off the belt and stacked on storage shelves until needed. Johnny watches boxes of frozen food being unloaded from a refrigerated truck. One of my helpers explains that a refrigerated truck is like a large icebox on wheels. This is the market's frozen food locker. Frozen food from the truck is put inside this locker room to be kept frozen until it is needed for customers. This truck is refrigerated too. In it, big pieces of meat are brought to the market. The meat is hung on hooks from an overhead slide, so it can be easily moved. The meat is pushed into a refrigerated room to be kept cold and fresh until it is ready to be cut up for sale. Mr. Dale, my meat department manager, shows us the meat he is going to cut today. In the meat cutting room, the meat is cut to prepare it for sale. This meat has been ground into hamburger. The cut and ground meat travels on rollers to the packaging and weighing room. In this room, packages of meat are made ready for selling. Since food must be kept very clean, the packages are carefully wrapped and labeled. They are covered with cellophane and then sealed with a hot iron. Each package is weighed, and the weight and price are marked on the label. Finally, the wrapped meat is ready to be put into a refrigerated display case in the front of the market. From it, customers may choose what they want. This case keeps the meat cold and fresh until it is ready to be taken home. The vegetables are taken from their storage room as they are needed and attractively arranged in the display cases in front of the market. Many different kinds of vegetables, and fruit too, are displayed. This chute carries cartons of canned and paper goods from their upstairs storage room to the market's main floor. Cans of food are put on the shelves. The price is stamped on each can, so the customers and the cashiers at the checkout stands will know how much each costs. The packages of frozen food are also placed in a refrigerated display case. Many different kinds of frozen foods are offered for sale. Meanwhile, I check on some signs needed for tomorrow's sale. I tell my sign maker what the sale price will be. The signs will be used in the windows of the market. Back in my office, Johnny sees some of the other work necessary to help run the market. This is my secretary. She's working on the sales record of yesterday's business. I must know how much food was sold the day before, so I can order more if it is needed. This is my bookkeeper. She's adding up some bills for me to pay. Now, Johnny, how would you like to open the market? Just push this buzzer. The doors are open. Here come the customers. One of the first customers to come in this morning is Johnny's mother. She's come to do her shopping and to pick up Johnny while I go back to work. As they shop, Johnny tells his mother what he's learned about the supermarket. How the big trucks come every day, bringing different kinds of food to the back loading platform. How the cartons of food are unloaded from the trucks and moved to the storage rooms. How the vegetables are cleaned. How the meat is cut and wrapped to keep it clean. How the clerks put the food in the display cases and arrange it on the shelves. What the office workers do. And some of the things I must do before the customers arrive. Johnny and his mother have completed and paid for their shopping. Today, Johnny's learned that a great many things go on behind the scenes of a supermarket. Of American Airlines. This is a big airport. In these buildings, passengers check their tickets and baggage. On the loading ramps, airplanes park while they unload passengers, mail, and cargo from other cities. This is the control tower at the airport. The men who control traffic at the airport work in a tower high above the ground. They are called control tower operators. A control tower operator watches the runway at the airport. He tells the pilots when to land or take off by radio. He hears messages from the pilots on a loudspeaker.
Los Angeles Tower, United 18, ready for takeoff.
United 18, this is Los Angeles Tower, cleared for takeoff.
Control tower operators know when it is safe for planes to land or take off. This plane is approaching the airport. The plane is bringing passengers, airmail, and air freight to the airport. The co-pilot sits at the control panel of the plane. He is called the first officer. The co-pilot helps the pilot to fly the plane. The pilot is called the captain. He will talk to the control tower operator by radio. He will ask for landing instructions.
Los Angeles Tower, this is American 15 over Long Beach at 0930. Request landing instructions. Over.
American 15 over Long Beach at 0930. Cleared to make straight-in approach. Runway 25 right. Wind west 8. Call 2 miles southeast of the range. Traffic, DC 6, 5 miles east, making straight-in approach for 25 left.
The control tower operator let the pilot know he heard the message. The numbers 0930 tell the time. The operator's message told the pilot which runway to land on and how strong the wind was blowing.
Los Angeles Tower, American 15, 2 miles southeast of Los Angeles range. Over.
American 15, cleared to land.
From the air, pilots can see numbers painted on the runway. The pilot is landing his plane on the runway which has 25R painted on it. A ramp agent pushes the passenger loading ramp to the door of the airplane.
This airplane brought 52 passengers to the airport. Cargo agents bring a conveyor to the plane. The passengers' baggage will be unloaded first. A tug pulls empty baggage carts to the conveyor. The suitcases ride down the conveyor. This makes it easy for the men to unload the baggage quickly. The cargo men must hurry, so the passengers will not have to wait for their suitcases. These bags are full of airmail. Airmail is unloaded next. The mail bags are sorted. Each bag has a tag that tells where the mail is to go. Mail, which will be sent on another plane, is put in one cart. It will be taken to other cities. Mail for the post office in this city is put in a different cart. More airmail is carried in the belly of the plane. Most airplanes carry many bags of airmail. Mail bags are also called mail pouches. This is a tug. The tug will pull the carts of mail to the post office at the airport. Cargo is carried in the belly of the plane too. It is unloaded last. Many different kinds of cargo are carried on passenger planes. Boxes of clothes for the big department stores. Boxes of food for the markets, boxes of machinery for the factories are unloaded quickly and easily. Many things needed in the city ride down the conveyor. The busy tug is hooked onto the loaded cart. The tug will pull the cart of cargo to the freight terminal. When everything has been unloaded and put on the carts, the doors of the plane are closed. A tug will pull the big plane to one of the hangars at the airport. The men hook a tow bar to the nose wheel of the plane. The tow bar is also hooked to the tug. This is a nose hanger. Fits in the hangar. The hangar is like a garage for the plane. The driver of the tug watches the plane. He is careful to put the plane in the right place. He does not want any part of the plane to bump against the hangar. All parts of the plane will be checked while the plane is in the hangar. This man will check an engine. He takes the cowling or cover off the engine. An engine has many parts. The mechanic checks the engine to be sure that the next flight will be safe. This man will check the rudder of the plane. The rudder turns the plane to the right or to the left, or makes the plane fly straight. This is one of the wing flaps. The wing flaps are used to slow down the plane when coming into land. Wing flaps give lift to the plane when the plane takes off. The elevators are on the tail of the plane. Elevators make the plane climb up in the air and come down to land. The rudder is working safely. The rudder turns the plane to the left or to the right. A tug pulls the plane to the wash rack outside the hangar. Dirt and grease will be washed off. Oil from the plane's engines and grease from the work of the mechanics are washed off with a special cleaner. All parts of the plane close to the engines are sprayed with another cleaner. Dust and dirt are washed off with water. The big hose is hard to hold because the stream of water is so strong. Mechanics have checked the plane and made it safe to fly. Other men have cleaned the plane. Now the plane is ready for another trip. A ramp agent brings the passenger loading ramp. Passengers will soon board the plane. Airmail and cargo will be put on the plane. The plane will have a safe trip as it takes passengers, airmail, and air freight to other cities.